I as a man, my greatest gift to my partner is my masculinity, and her greatest gift to me is her femininity. What helps me to create the space for her to drop more deeply into surrender and to trust isn't me moving into vulnerability, it's me stepping into emotional courage. It's more about me having emotional resonance, connection to myself, emotional courage to meet what's going on in her as well, and to be with her to create that space. I see the pathway for men is to really explore the different aspects of masculinity. Maybe they're repressing their own sense of certainty, healthy aggression, sexuality, authority, influence, and really looking and owning those, and in a sense like activating those qualities. Where are these qualities showing up in a distorted sense where they're creating destruction, that it's creating disharmony in your environment? What's the healthy, authentic expression of these for me?
Welcome to the Call to Courage. I'm Gareth, and I'm joined today by a brother from Down Under, David Charles. Welcome to the show, bro. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, awesome to be here. Thank you.
We're going to do the best we can with the construction work happening outside the window at my place. So, maybe introduce yourself and let us know what keeps you busy in the world, brother. What's your mission that you're serving right now, and what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Beautiful. Thanks, mate. So my mission is to help men embrace, strengthen, own, unlock their masculinity, and really step into a place of certainty, confidence, self-esteem, and internal balance within themselves. Ultimately, I love working with people around masculine and feminine, and also relationships. So my wife and I do a bit of work with together with women as well, and we're just stepping into the couple space. Yeah, that's what keeps me busy.
What does it mean to unlock your masculine? How would a masculine be locked?
Awesome. Great question. So from my perspective, what I see today is a lot of men being disconnected from masculinity. I see a lot of toxic, like language around toxic masculinity, a disconnection from some of the traits that are actually very generative, such as being being assertive, having strong boundaries, even ambition to a level is starting to be mixed with this topic of toxic masculinity. So what I see is that a lot of men disconnect from the healthy aspects of these through fear of being too masculine, too strong, too dominant in a healthy, positive sense. So yeah, that's the unlocking, like the unlocking of these aspects of self, sexuality as well, freeing them up. Yeah.
And how do you see this coming about? Like, what is it that's causing this? Like, what's the general theme that you see men or young men that grow into men getting disconnected from these parts of their power? Is there something that you can point to? Like, what do you articulate
Yeah,
as
I
the reason?
actually I see it being a generational thing. So there's a book called Raising Boys, and a book called Manhood. And in that book, what he talks about is that previously, before the Industrial Revolution, the fathers used to be with the sons in the home. And there was a disconnection there where the fathers went away to work. So we lost a lot of our natural role modeling and conditioning from our fathers and from the masculine. So the fathers went away, and we lost the learning that we received from our fathers through just spending time with them through osmosis. So there was a disconnection there. I also see there being a disconnection in terms of feminism as well. And feminism brought about so many positive things to us, but it also, in ways, started to create some of these narratives around toxic masculinity, around like the shifting in our pop culture, the shifting in the depiction of males inside our books, TV shows, our movies, even like Wife to Wife, of the depiction of the bumbling father. Like what I see in so many movies is we've got sort of two main characters or main archetypes of the masculine of man. It's like the bumbling father or the tyrant, like the the evil, egotistical is often quite a strong, dominant masculine figure, but we don't see many of those qualities like the strong, dominant, confident in a healthy role model. It's reasonably rare, apart from in our superheroes, but also in sometimes in the superheroes, as the time goes on, they turn more into bumbling sort of idiots. So yeah, I feel like there's so many different factors. There's also like the idea of in the spiritual world, the feminine rising as well. And I really see this as a time of creating healthy and restoring healthy masculinity that's grounded, connected, that has integrated those aspects of femininity, such as like receptiveness to the body, connection to the body, letting go of control. And yeah, we're being asked to step into a new way that we haven't had before.
What was your relationship with your father like? How does your path of integrating your and unlocking your own masculinity look?
Awesome. Great question. So my dad was a very hard worker. He ran his own business and he sacrificed so much. Like when I was growing up, I did have this feeling of like, where's my dad? And he wasn't very present. He was very stuck in his own world. And as much as I love my father, he was just doing the best that he had. His dad also wasn't very present. There was a bit of sort of alcoholism in the family as well. So my dad was he wanted to make change, but he also was just deeply rooted in some negative traits and some negative beliefs about himself and about being man in the world. Like he just worked. That's where he got his value from. So we ended up having a shift when became an adult and I started doing personal development because I actually started to recognize all that he'd given, and he started actually providing a lot more positive affirmation to me. We had a beautiful coming together. He passed away in 2019, just after we met, actually, about 3 weeks afterwards. And
Hmm.
we knew he was sick for about a year. And in that period, I feel like I'm going deep into it straight away, but he,
Go for it, bro.
we had a beautiful conversation because we knew for about a year he wasn't going to live. He had asbestosis. And we just had some super powerful, we'd had a big healing for sort of 5 years leading up to that. And then from that moment, there was just we just got each other on a whole new level. I thanked him. I thanked him so deeply for all that he'd sacrificed for us. No one had ever said that anything like that to him, like from my family at all. And he broke down in that moment. It was such a
Wow.
powerful, it was such a powerful moment. And there was this sense of him handing the torch over to me to kind of steward and lead the family. So yeah, we've certainly been on a journey. We've never been at sort of like opposite ends, I wouldn't say. We certainly had conflict. He was a very good positive role model around uh, being truthful and around integrity. I used to play up a little bit when I was younger, and he always held me to account for that, which I'm so grateful for. And
Mm, yes.
yeah, yeah. What? Yeah. Do you have any other questions for me? Because I feel like I touched so much on that. Or
There's loads to go down there, brother. Yeah, I was going to ask you. One of them is there's a gift in knowing that your father's going to transition. You get that opportunity. You're right. You get the chance to do that. What is the shadow side of knowing that there's a finite timeline? What's the downside of knowing that you've only got a certain amount of time left, except the acceptance of it, or is it all just good?
yeah, certainly not all good. I feel quite fortunate actually. There's I heard it afterwards. Jordan Peterson talks about that the somewhat like the role of a man should be that he's sort of like the leader or the strongest person at his father's funeral to like step into like the stewarding of the family.
Hmm.
And I feel very fortunate that kind of happened naturally through a lot of the men's work that I did. I didn't have that frame coming into it, but I noticed that that's what was coming up for me. So I see the shadow side of, like, there were times where I was almost completely emotionless and I was kind of observing myself going like, I'm totally balanced. My dad just died. I am completely neutral.
Hmm.
And I see the shadow side of suppressing the emotions. I wasn't suppressing in that moment, but I had to be very aware that when I was in front of my family, there was only little spurts of emotion that was coming up for me. And it felt naturally that I was holding the space for my sister and my mum. And if I was to, like, reflecting back on it, I can see there's sort of like a primal aspect where it's like, if I broke down who was going to look after the funeral, the decisions that needed to be made, them emotionally. So yeah, I articulated to them, I'm going to create my own space to have my own grieving process. And that's what I did. So the shadow side is not creating a grieving process, and also having expectations about how that grieving process is going to look for each person. It's going to be look different person to person. It's going to look different, in my belief, male to female as well. Yeah. Yeah, it was powerful initiation. Yeah.
There's so much there. I'd like to offer something to anybody listening to this that doesn't have the gift of knowing that the timeline is inevitably coming, that they have the opportunity to speak to a parent or a father in this case. What would you suggest that they use as a framework to have that conversation without knowing? You know, like our parents
Mm.
could transition at any day, and as shitty as it would be knowing that they've got something terminal, that the clock is ticking, at some level the clock's ticking anyway. So how would you suggest somebody has that conversation with a parent before they transition?
Amazing. So as a frame, again, like, I did know that my dad was passing away. So I was very particular about asking him certain questions. And in so much, I just feel we scratched the surface. It was actually the day before he went into hospital where he was incoherent. I'd been asking a friend of mine, can you send me a list of these questions that you asked your father to get to know him better? It arrived the Thursday night, and I was like, cool, I'm going to ask him. Friday morning, my dad woke up, was incoherent, went to hospital, basically almost died on the Friday, and then was
Wow.
incoherent to the Wednesday. So I never got to ask him the questions that I really want to. I feel like we just scratched the surface. So my encouragement is for people to write a list of questions and just to begin a conversation. It doesn't have to happen in one conversation, but for my dad, it took a little bit to kind of warm him into this. I actually kind of cornered him when he was in hospital. I'm like, I'm just going to go and sit there for 3 hours. He can't go anywhere.
Love it.
So we just started talking about his life and about his challenges, and yeah, just ask the questions that you really want to know. Like, I wish that I had asked him, what advice do you have for me around being a husband or choosing a partner? I hadn't met my wife then. What do you recommend to me? What lessons do you have from me? And it doesn't mean that I have to take on everything that he speaks about with gospel, but just to create a deeper reflection for myself. So yeah, what questions? Like, what questions about the path? What like a career or business, or what advice do you have in career, business? What relationships, friendships? Yeah. What would you have done differently if you had your time again? Those sort of questions. Yeah.
What do you think he would have said if you'd asked him about the relationship question?
Oof. Yeah, I've pondered this quite a fair bit. He and my mum had a very challenging relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like almost certainly he would have just said about something like really choose your partner well, and 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 told me about how much of an important decision it is. Yeah, he like, I can kind of see that a lot of his life he wasn't super present with us because like his relationship with my mum was very challenging. So I can see how he kind
Mm-hmm.
of went and removed himself from that situation. She would argue with him a lot
Mm-hmm.
about just tiny little things. So yeah, in this moment, it would certainly be something about choose your partner well, and peace in the home is really important. Something like that.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. I have a framework that I used for a conversation to have with my mother um, around a similar thing, where I recognized that our relationship, as I was also kind of a difficult teenager, and my mom was wanting to sort of control, to protect, and there was a part of me that just wanted to rebel, to have my own space and freedom. And so we went through this kind of tumultuous time growing up. And as we got into adulthood, we sort of became, I would say, like amiable, but we would have these conversations that were pretty much at surface level. And if I reflected on the relationships that I have in my life and how I value them, I wouldn't have valued this one because we don't go really deep, and I don't really want to have connections with people that I don't touch really important things. We just talk about the weather and other people that we know. And so I had the opportunity, and I haven't yet done it with my dad, but framing the conversation as a desire for me, as like, hey, mom, I really want to get to know you better. Are you open to having this conversation? I'd like to ask you some questions about your life in a frame that's not mother and son. If we could put that apart for a side for a while and just let me chat to you about things that I haven't yet been able to ask you about because we don't know how long we're going to have together. The frame that I then used was asked her to make a timeline of her life and to talk me through her life and allow me to ask questions about various things as she explained her experience to me. And then she was allowed to do the same. I wrote a timeline of my life and she got to ask her questions in a separate, we did it on Zoom because she's in South Africa. But anyway, the point of it was two really fucking amazing conversations where I got to ask all the things that I never really knew about my mother before. She got to hear some of the stuff that she had suspected, like as a mother, but didn't know because of the role that she played, being that part of my life. And the end result has been such a beautiful deepening of our connection and our friendship. Almost, we have a friendship now where like we chat and we get to talk about stuff at a different level. We still ask about the weather and common contacts, but it's been such a powerful way to be able to have this conversation. And I think my suggestion for anybody doing it is to frame it as your own desire. Like, this is something that I want, and this is the reason why, because I think it would make our relationship deeper. And yeah, I'm really grateful that I had the courage to do that, because it wasn't an easy thing to do, to switch these roles that we've played for our entire lives for one another into something. I call it sister time. We basically went into sister time and gossiped about first boyfriends and did you have other lovers before dad and all the things. And so, yeah, stuff that we never really would have had access to.
That's cool. Yeah, I haven't had this conversation with my mum, so this is inspiring me to think about, like, how would I go about that question. There's certain things where, yeah, I probably wouldn't ask her, like some of the lover stuff. But yeah, there's certainly invitation for me in that as well. My relationship with my mum has been much more challenging than my dad. So
Okay.
there's I'm like the challenging. There's something in our, whether or not it's like our souls have come to stretch each other. For me, it's like this constant, like, acceptance, deep acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing.
What's the challenge for you there? How do you see that? What's the
Yeah,
lesson that you're learning besides acceptance through what?
she's very, very fear driven, very fear driven in terms of like, on the scale of sort of like fear, worry, doubt, judgment. She is one of the most fearful people that I've ever met, and I say that with like a lot of love.
Mm.
But she's
Wow.
she's she's very fear driven, very emotionally challenged. Like, any sort of emotion comes up for her, she throws her hands up and kind of waves them about, and then kind of goes and has time by herself. She's like, I can't talk. So there's always, like, I've wanted to create this deeper connection with her, and to a degree there has been an unwillingness, at least in the
Hmm.
ways that I've gone about it before. And I've spent a lot of time, like, in personal process with my relationship with my mum, and also trying to build more of a bridge. But there's a emotion deeply scares her. And so, but I can see how using this conversation as well about the timeline could be a beautiful step forward, because I haven't used that frame before. I've used frames of, like, I want to connect with you more, I want to talk with you more. And so it'll
Mm-hmm.
be interesting between her. Like, so I've got a younger sister and an older half brother, and the dynamics are so different between my two siblings versus with me. It's like that we've had some sort of almost like soul contract
Mm.
in our life. Like, yeah, the similar challenge. I have similar challenges with her as what my dad did. So yeah.
Hmm.
Cool
Wow.
stuff, mate. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't it? I appreciate you sharing about it with being with your mum, because it wasn't even on my radar to do that with her. It had been previously, but just hearing your description of that has inspired me to get curious about how I could have that conversation. I've tried to touch on it in different ways before, but it hasn't been something that's landed well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. No
Yeah,
worries, bro.
yeah, yeah. Awesome.
Let's cycle back to what I heard you say earlier in the conversation. You came to personal development early. How does that happen? How do you suddenly make that decision, or what's the catalyst for you making a decision that personal development is part of your path?
Awesome. So, from quite a young age, I was involved with scouting and also with a lot of leadership within my within school. So, I did a lot of sort of outdoor education, leadership stuff. So, the personal development was always kind of intertwined from sort of 11, 12. That was intertwined. My dad also used to do quite a lot of it when he was younger, when he was sort of in his 20s. He was a very forward thinking type of man. So in some ways it was kind of like embedded in scouts, embedded in school with the leadership program, embedded a little bit with my dad very loosely. Never spoke about it. But at 19, the reason it came about was because I was having a really challenging relationship at the time. And my partner went to a personal development program, like a free weekend sort of seminar workshop, loved it, ended up enrolling for a longer one. And I had this sense of like, we're in a lot of trouble here and I need to do something. And I didn't know what that something was. We tried many different things, psychologists, counseling, that sort of stuff. And yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was the beginning. That was really the beginning for me. Yeah. So it was about
And
19 and just
what's your
dove straight
path
in.
been? What's your path been? I know you've done some NLP and a couple of things. Like, what are the things that have supported you the most? And yeah, what do you vibe with in terms of your process?
Yeah, so initially when I started, it was more on the NLP side of things and sort of
Can you
more,
explain what NLP is for those who don't yet?
yeah, so neuro linguistic programming. So the way that I relate to it personally is the sort of that our thoughts, our mind create our reality, that we delete, distort, um, generalize, like different things. Like we have essentially a set of beliefs that control our construct and the way that we navigate through our life. And so for me, the way that I've related to it's a lot about self-talk. And like there's also timeline therapy where you go back to previous times in your life and that sort of stuff. But for me,
Yeah.
my experience of NLP has been it's much more from a mind consciousness type level. That created an initial shift, and I actually created quite a lot of success from using NLP. I got into trading when I was about 24, and I was just purely using sort of mind power, NLP, bit of sort of hypnosis sort of stuff, and that created a lot of success. But there was still deep emotional stuff that I hadn't touched on. So for me, the deepest shifts have been learning how to feel my emotions where I'm not in repression or reactivity, where I can connect with my emotions, be with them, and also a deeper spiritual connection. They've really been the two things that have created the shift.
Mm. Talk me through this for those who maybe don't know what this is. How do you talk yourself into being a good trader? What does that process look like? How do you
Yeah,
use NLP to
awesome.
be successful?
Great. So I would, before I traded, and I would also do this outside of trading, I'd have a list of affirmations and I would sit down and I would meditate and I would replay over in my mind trades going well. And I would say things to myself like, I'm a successful trader. Um, I'm, I make consistent profits. I'm calm, cool, collected. And I would just repeat, they would be my mantras that I would say over and over and over and over again to myself in
Uh-huh.
like a deeply dropped in state. So I would do that before a trading session. I would do that during a trading session if I noticed there was some negative thoughts going on. And then I would do that sometime later in the day as well. And
Mm.
also like I just know what type of trades are going to work. I just know. And so I
Okay.
would say a lot of these things to myself. And yeah,
Okay.
that was the foundation. Yeah, I became with the teacher that I was learning from, who taught around the world. Um, I was either number one or number two in Australia for his students. The only thing I was doing differently was that. That was it. We all learned
Wow.
the same strategies. Yeah, I really pinpoint my success in that trading for to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and then you became sort of financially free at a pretty young age. You put it as a result of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked as an electrician when I left school. I loved working with my hands, but I also wanted to, I loved physics. I loved sort of engineering, and it kind of felt like a good balance where I got to think about, electrical engineering, but also work with my hands. So I dove into electrical work, and I had three companies that actually, the first one went bankrupt, the second one ran out of work, the third one went bankrupt. And each time it was like, I'm not meant to be doing this long term. But I had saved quite a lot of money, and I wanted to get into property development. That didn't feel quite right. And I got into trading. And yeah, I was just working as a trader essentially. I was working very little. I was working about half an hour ish a day, something like that. And
Wow.
sometimes 15 minutes a day. And I had that experience of 25, just not having to go to work. I had so much time that gave me more time for personal development, but it also sent me on this big deepward journey. That was like the beginning of the deep descent, because I had so much time and I had all these emotions that had the space to rise up. And I was starting to question more deeply, like, why am I here? What's the purpose in life? And that sort of thing. Alison Armstrong, who wrote a book called Keys to the Kingdom, she talks about the moving from late prince through the tunnel to king. And I kind of went through that sort of cycle of, I'd kind of built this thing that I didn't really need to spend a lot of time doing, had all this time. And it's like the deeper questions of life came forward.
How do you how do you do that? How do you sit with your emotions in a family that seem to be suppressing their emotions everywhere around them? What's the strategy? Is it just the fact that you had this strong grounding in NLP, that you were a solid human, or is there something specifically that allows you to feel these emotions? And the reason I'm asking this question is I think what I'm noticing in men's work is a lot of men are not, first of all, encouraged to feel certain emotions, or we label certain emotions as good and others as bad. And so we want to feel the good ones and suppress or just not even touch on the bad ones. But I think we drain a lot of power there. So, and maybe we can get into this because I'm sure this is potentially what's in your work as well. But what's the method for feeling your emotions? I mean, it may sound simple because it's probably a very natural thing, but how do you find the space to actually sit with it rather than avoid it? Because there is a tendency, had you not been prepared to feel it, to busy yourself with the next project or start another business to avoid the feeling. So how do you sit and reconcile that part of yourself?
And I did do that. I'd immerse myself in a project, and then sort of like
Uh-huh.
2 months, I just went on this cycle, immerse myself. I built like a competition spec 4 drive. And so I would like immerse myself into like head on thinking about these projects all the time. And
Uh-huh.
then sort of like 2 months in, the the feelings would start to arise, and my sleep would start getting a bit shit. And yeah,
Mm.
there was this cycle. And yeah, the sort of the emotion, the negative emotions would rise up. So what
Uh-huh.
really helped me was beginning to tap into my body and connect more deeply to my body and sensation. I feel like that's a very strong grounding and a very strong path forward for men to begin to feel our emotions, because we can be so, like, I was somewhat numb from
Mm-hmm.
sort of the neck down. And I would try and process my emotions, think about my emotions, think about how could I move out of them rather than just feel and be with them. So yeah, the beginning for me was starting to tap into sensation and tap into my body. I did a feminine embodiment uh, workshop program that was the beginning of that for me. I don't necessarily recommend that for men to go and do, because there was some other sort of like complications that I experienced from doing that program. And
Okay.
but the core thing that I learnt was just tapping into my body, my breath, dropping into my embodiment more deeply, being able to
Mm.
feel.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. I have a similar story, which is what I've felt in another version of my life, where I was also not feeling any of the uncomfortable feelings, not looking at any of the things that were triggering inside me, not aware of what my wounds were. And I had the same thing. I was like numb from this part, but it sort of stopped just below, just above my genitals, meaning I was fucking hyperactive in my head and hyperactive in my genitals, but nothing in the middle. And so this is where everything would rest. And yeah, for me, one of the ways to really come through that place is to really understand how to be able to speak about what's genuinely going on. So, in addition to the actual embodiment practices and some emotional movement practices, the ability to be able to speak from the heart, meaning I can actually sit with you and say, hey, bro, this is exactly how I'm feeling, not tell a story that I'm making up in my head, but genuinely tune into what's happening in my body and to be able to articulate it is what courage is, to speak from the heart. And when that starts to happen, the heart starts to open and you open the channel between the head and the sex center so that the energy starts to move through in a more, a more clear way, so that you're able to actually be with what's genuinely alive and not to judge it. So yeah, amazing to hear you say that. I'd love to hear what are the complications of the feminine initiation you chose. And it's kind of an
Yeah,
interesting choice for a dude to make that decision. But yeah, what was some of the things that was it specifically
awesome.
for men, or did you just find yourself in a place of wanting to try something different? Or
Yeah, I'll touch on that in a moment. One thing that I just wanted to, speak to. You were talking about the speaking, and I feel like that's a beautiful way to, it can be a beautiful way for men to start to connect to that, to express the energy, to move the energy, to give it to, there's sort of like a channel. And yeah, it's powerful to sit with other people, other men, and just have that space to begin to move that energy. It can actually be, some of the deepest stuff that I've touched on, I couldn't touch on it just by myself. I had to work with someone, or I had to be in a space with other men, and that gave that helped to liberate it. That helped to move it. So
mm-hmm.
I wanted to speak to that. The second thing that I wanted to speak to was that I'm very passionate about men finding emotional courage. And I actually love the frame of that we as men are being asked to step into emotional courage rather than vulnerability. And for me, there's a difference in the frequency. Vulnerability can be powerful as a man, but I don't see it as being sort of like the ultimate end goal that resonates with me. For me, it's more the emotional courage of, I'm courageous enough to meet what's going on inside of myself, to be sovereign, to be a man that's like upright, strong spine, able to feel everything that's going on, able to share that with others when it's appropriate. Um, yeah, so I actually love that
I
this
love
podcast is
that.
called The Call to Courage, because that's one of the things that I love to speak about, is the call to emotional courage for men.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I love that. I haven't heard it framed that way, but yeah. And sorry, just to come back while we're still here, do you
Yes,
see do you see that it's really just a function of linguistics and frame that points to what is essentially sometimes described as vulnerability, or do you see them as different?
I see them as different. For me, like as an example, when I was doing the feminine embodiment work, I saw that as a path to vulnerability, where there was, I see a almost like a younger aspect to myself. When I connect to vulnerability, I see like a vulnerable side of me that needs some form of almost like protection, that's seeking safety, and I think that's a powerful thing for men to have access to, also to understand how to meet the vulnerability in, as an example, in their partner. But I see, vulnerability is more of a path of like femininity, and emotional courage as being sort of like the masculine side of that. Uh, yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Because where
Wow.
that kind of comes from is, when I think about, I love this frame of, and I'm being mindful that we've got that point around the feminine
Keep
embodiment.
it going, brother.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
man. We'll come
So
back.
I love the frame of 3 stages of relationships. The first one being codependent, and then the next one being independent, and then the next one being interdependent. So this sense of the last stage being that we're connected, we're sovereign individuals, but we give the gift of ourselves to the other person. And
Hmm.
in regards to masculinity and femininity, I see what resonates with me is that, I, as a man, my greatest gift to my partner is my masculinity, and her greatest gift to me is her femininity. And that what helps me to create the space for her to drop more deeply into surrender and to trust and to let go of control isn't me moving into vulnerability. It's me stepping into emotional courage.
Okay,
And
got it.
that's one frame that kind of helps me around what am I being asked for. It's not necessarily that she's asking me to really connect down into my vulnerability, but it's more about me having emotional resonance, connection to myself, emotional courage to meet what's going on in her as well, and to be with her, to create that space, to hold that space when it's appropriate, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We haven't spoken for a long time. We met in a men's retreat like in 2019, and it's like our paths have been sort of running parallel in some ways, and our work has been similar. I've also been on a deep journey with my partner and exploring the powerful container that is a transformational relationship and what does it mean to show up. And I loved what you said there. I want to share one of the things that's a theme for me is recognizing that actually me showing up in my fullness for my partner is actually a function of this inner marriage where I'm both strong masculine but also have access to the feminine elements of what it means to be connected to my emotions, to be in trust and surrender, and to be all of those. And really, for my ability to be able to show up in my fullness is to be able to be solid in myself. I call it inner marriage, like this place of both my masculine and feminine being solid first. And I think how I've been coaching people to support themselves to find partnership is to recognize that there are pretty often patterns where we're outsourcing our feminine, specifically as men, meaning I'm a dude, I'm like this, I do these things, but I don't connect to trust, surrender, vulnerability, emotional stuff. And then I seek that in my partner, but it automatically creates this like loop of me projecting all the things that I don't quite have in myself into my partner. So yeah, my work to get to show up in my fullness with my partner is to recognize that I am full already, and I'm not wanting to be codependent, and I actually don't want to be independent. I want to be interdependent, and that is recognizing that I'm this analogy sometimes of people like a relationship must be 50-50. No, a relationship is 100 and 100. You've got to come in your fullness, because if you only come with 50, you're waiting for your partner to bring the other 50. And somehow you get into this loop of I'm not enough without you, which creates the codependency. But the interdependency is like I'm solid with me. I'm loving this connection. I'm hoping that it lasts forever, but if it doesn't, I'm still going to be okay. I'm not wobbling with that, and I'm not living every single day in fear that you would leave, because I'm okay with myself and I show up for myself in those places first. And so, yeah, I love that. I love that frame that you use for holding that. I like the emotional courage. I think that's a powerful word that I'm definitely going to use. I'll
Yeah.
credit you
Awesome.
in the footnotes.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you were talking about. Like I was hearing when you were talking about the inner marriage, I really see that as being like the independence. Like that Amy and I, when we first met each other, we were both in that independent phase. And that's meant that, the chances of us sliding into codependency is much less, because it's like I'm 100% responsible for me. And I feel like the
Hmm.
jump, and what I was hearing you saying as well, is like I see interdependence being like I'm responsible for me, and I'm also responsible for like my partner and how like she's experiencing. And we were both in that independent when we met each other of like I'm responsible for me, you do you. It's almost, yeah, there's almost like this sense of separation there where the independence, like I'm fully connected, fully whole within myself, and I'm also responsible and caring for my partner and what she's going through, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
How did you
Yeah.
guys meet? What's her jam? I don't know anything about this being.
Cool. It's an interesting story actually, because we met in March 2020. She is originally from Adelaide, and we met via Facebook. she tells this really funny story, actually, that she was scrolling through Facebook and, or it just like I popped up as a friend request, and she was like, "That's the man that I'm going to marry. That's the man that I've been talking about." As soon as she's like, she literally just
Wow.
saw my profile pitch. She was like, shaved head, um, kind of angry looking, um, big arm muscles, drives fast cars. She's like, that's literally what she said, and she actually said that when we got married as well.
Isn't that
And
most fucking Australians?
yeah, totally. So yeah, we started talking then, and yeah, we had a dance over social media for 9 months, and I'd kind of just I'd completed a relationship in sort of like the end of 2020, and that for me was like a flag in the ground moment of like, I'm never going to have a relationship like that again. And it was just like,
Mm.
no, cycle is 100% completed here. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just a deeper knowing of like the standards that I wanted to have in my relationship. So I knew that I wanted to have friendship as the foundation of my relationships moving forward. So we started talking underneath that sort of that frame. And I led the sort of the relationship to blossom into a deep friendship. There was obviously attraction, but I really was very specific about keeping away from, sexting and doing all that kind of stuff, because there was attraction, but
Mm-hmm.
we also couldn't see each other for 9 months. I was in Melbourne, most locked down place in the world. She was in Adelaide.
Ah, this is during the lockdown. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we couldn't actually go and see each other. And
Okay.
yeah, in December, I drove over to meet her for a week, and didn't know what was going to sort of come from it, if there was going to be that resonance when we met each other in person. And I essentially walked through the front door and said, "There she is." And
Wow.
we've been through like a few different journeys of living in Adelaide, living in Queensland, living in Melbourne. We're in Melbourne currently, about to move over to Adelaide, and yeah, it's it's
Beautiful.
been a cool ride. Yeah.
What did she do? What's her mission? And
Yeah,
you
so
guys working together now? Is she also on this path of supporting and guiding others?
she traditionally, she's been initiated into a lineage based in Peru, like um need to actually remember I can't remember the exact lineage name right now, but essentially it's around shamanism, like the traditional Peruvian sort of shamanism. So she's been trained as a cacao ceremonialist, and that's a lot of the work she does. She does a lot of work with people around connecting them to their inner self, to their heart. She works primarily with, almost exclusively with women, actually, just around
Okay.
connecting to their heart, connecting them to their sense of God, to their sense of love and devotion for themselves, for other people. Yeah,
Mm.
we make a beautiful pairing in the work that we do. Yeah, she's taught me so much about love.
What has she taught you?
She is just a ball of love, and she loves so deeply. She devotes herself so deeply to the path of love and being loving of others, and also to listening to what God, the universe, wants for her. Like, she's just so deeply, she devotes herself to it. She prays a lot. She's in deep communion. So she's taught me a lot about that as well. Being in deep communion, about listening, about loving others. Yeah. Also, like, loving myself. We've been on a deep healing journey together, in terms of allowing the full force of our love for each other to kind of land, like allowing her love, her immense love, to really land for me, and for me to receive that. It's been, a constant feeling of cracking open to like how much more love, and her experience is that as well, similar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for dropping into that. Wow.
Yeah.
What was the never again theme of the last relationship?
Awesome. So The never again theme was the woman that I was seeing. She was just very unwilling. Like you spoke about the 100%, like the
Mm-hmm.
100% responsibility. And there was very little responsibility. The moment where it was like completely nut, this is done. My dad had died like 2 days before, and we were out at dinner, and she was speaking to me, and I was just I was in sort of a liminal space. Like I wasn't completely grounded, landed. I was like, well, my whole world is shifting. I
Mm.
wasn't feeling like super, yeah, wasn't feeling super landed and grounded. And I was enjoying the time with her, but essentially a dog walked past as she was talking, and the dog jumped up, and I patted her, and she lost it about not being present with her while she was speaking. And she had a massive sort of blow up about that. And that was just the line in the sand for me of like, nah, my dad's died like 2 days before. This is totally unacceptable behavior. Even when I was
Mm-hmm.
describing to her about, you know, my dad's just died, and yeah, I'm having a little bit of trouble being. She was just on it. So that was that was the line in the sand. I've had many challenging relationships that have led up. I've had one long-term relationship that was really beautiful that just was, we came to completion. I've had a few sort of challenging ones, and then my wife Amy, which has been a beautiful coming together. That was that she came as a result of me going no more. Like I choose a woman that's willing to take 100% responsibility for her parts, that's willing to do the work. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Mm. What's the I'm blessed to still have my father alive. What shifts in a man's life when his father transitions?
It was like literally the day after he died, I literally had this feeling of I'm the man of the family now. And I noticed that, at the moment where we're selling the family home, and I noticed that it's like I have an older brother, but he didn't take up that mantle. It wasn't real. I don't feel like it was ever meant to. Yeah, he's kind of been a little bit separate from the family. So what what I see it being is, yeah, I was past the mantle, and there's been a mixture of that it's naturally fallen on me, but also that I had to choose it. I had to. There's been times where my mum or my sister want to kind of take charge of what's going on, or like around and I'm just like, there needs to be one leader for for this process to go simply and easily, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to lead this. And when I do that from a place of connection, place from heart, I feel them both relax. And so yeah, we've got a
Mm-hmm.
big garage sale coming up over the weekend. So that's been very
Mm-hmm.
much about me kind of setting the plan and leading how we're going to handle it and that sort of stuff. Obviously taking consideration and that kind of stuff of their thoughts. But that has been my experience. Literally the day after he died, it was like, yep, you're the leader of the family now. And that's been, yeah, a mix of me naturally stepping into that and also having to choose it at times where um, yeah, where there's been a little bit of challenge or conflict in the family.
Mm. Yeah. David Data's book, The Way of the Superior Man, one of his lessons in the book is to meditate and have this practice of living your life as though your father has died. The idea of being a man, because many men, and you've done a lot of work clearly that started at 21 that got you to a place where you also had the opportunity to have the conversation with your dad before he died. But there's something about a lot of men that are either living in their father's shadow or not fully stepping up in responsibility because they feel that their father still has reign or power or something like that. And it holds them back through a lot of ways in their life. And sometimes also seeking validation, working everything in my life to make sure that I can signal things to my dad. And I definitely have this. A part of me is still like some of the decisions that I make, I'm like, will my dad think this is a good idea or something like that? And yeah, it's an energy leak because it takes me away out of my authentic truth. And obviously, there's going to be a natural desire to want to impress the man that was the rock in my life. And yeah, but it's a powerful thing to get to. And I think a lot of men have said that, the day that their father transitions, as painful as it is, there's some part of them that suddenly comes alive because they now have to step up, like you said, or they suddenly don't need the validation of this person that's transitioned, and now it's their chance to do things. But in some ways, if you don't step into that early, you can waste a lot of years seeking the validation of your father. And I was, yeah, interesting to hear you speak to that exact point, which is like, yeah, I now have to do it. There's that sense of like, no one else is coming to save us. We have that daddy, like divine protector, depending on the relationship that you have with your dad, that perhaps things will always be okay when he's around, and then one day he's not.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, there was certainly a shift in that as well. Like, I've got to, I've got to step up. I got to kind of put the foot, like take the foot off the brake a little bit and just fully step forward. I also turned 30 around, like maybe a month prior, 3 weeks prior to that as well. So yeah, there was a lot of sort of initiations that were going on at the same time. Yeah.
What do you see as a challenge for modern men? What's got you onto the path of wanting to support men specifically? What do you see as some of the major
Awesome.
challenges or themes that we're dancing with?
I see that there is a lot of personal development opportunity in the world today. And in saying that, I feel like a lot of personal development is actually quite feminine in nature. And I get very curious about, yeah, just the industry and the opportunities that men have to step into their own truest expression of masculinity. And I find there being a mix of, a lot of personal development spaces are filled with a lot of women. Like you go to a lot of workshops and that kind of stuff, and a lot of workshops are maybe co-gendered, but there's, depending on which space you're in, but there's typically, let's say on average, 80%, 70% women, um, 20, 30% men. And I don't so much see that as there being some of the women that I speak to get really frustrated about men, and they're like, oh, they're not willing to do the personal development. I actually don't believe that. I believe that there's not that many places that men resonate with to go and do their personal development. And so I see one of the challenges is that, yeah, a lot of personal development being quite feminine in my belief in nature, but also some of the other options they've got are almost men telling men how to be men. And I don't like that. Like men, like you need to be hard, you need to be strong, you need to be like all these things. And yes, to having capacity to be in those aspects, but we're not one dimensional. Some of the personal development I see for men is quite one dimensional in nature. It's like, oh, be more stoic, or be stronger, be that strong dominant leader or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the challenges that I see is that, yeah, there isn't too many options out there for men to do very deep work, specifically around their masculinity, and to find and uncover who they are as a man rather than being told of what a man is. Um,
Mm.
I also see it as a lot of the personal development that we have is still in some way kind of mixed up with the overarching conditioning that we've received around men masculinity. Like some of the femininity embodiment work that I did, some of the narratives they were giving, and why I said back then was that I wonder how helpful it was.
Yes.
Embedded in some of that was that masculinity is, like, one of the things they said is masculinity is war and violence come from masculinity. And I was just like, that's that's not the truth. There's different ways that we enact war and violence within, if we're in more in masculine or more in feminine, but there was conditioning embedded into the personal development around the negativity or toxicity of masculinity. And I see that a lot in personal development, like masculine being talked about as being cold, hard, or rigid, and you need to be more in your feminine and soft and flowing and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I feel like I've kind of danced on a few different pieces there. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm curious if there's
Mhm.
what do you hear when I was speaking to that? What's your sort of belief around personal development and men?
I think as a general theme, there tends to be this absent father as a potential theme in our society at the moment. You touched on it as a function of um, the industrial age, where men of working age would leave the house, and suddenly then boys were left to be raised in schools, which are mostly teachers tend to be mostly women in schools, and or then raised by moms at home where dads are not present. And yeah, it's not something that you can just get a woman to teach what masculinity is. This is the healthy expression of the masculine. It's really an embodied transmission that needs to happen in order for young men to be able to receive this part and be able to see what it's like to be able to hold boundaries and to be courageous and to, yeah, walk with purpose and to be stoic and humble. And so I think there's definitely that as one theme. Um, I think one of the challenges as well is we've been labeling our emotions. We're like, this is a bad thing to do. This is not a good thing to do. This is how we are. I mean, I'm from South Africa, and we have of British descent this sense of like politeness as a general theme, where we'll always be okay with other people. And often what tends to happen is you never get to what's genuinely true, because we don't want to talk about the bad news. Like, I'm not going to go for a beer and tell you that I'm having a tough time at home or my business is shit. I've tended, and this is my own story, I tended to rather tell the happy stories that made me look a specific way. But how I understand that is, when I'm not authentically communicating what's alive with me, it's absolutely impossible to build trust. Meaning, when my words don't match my energy, some part of you doesn't trust me, and you can't quite put your finger on it. You'll be like, "Hey, Gareth, how are things going with your partner?" And if it's turbulent, and I go, "Yeah, they're good," but they're not, like, some part of you goes like, zzzt, like something just doesn't quite match what I said. My words were things were good, but some part of your energy system, your animal body, is connected to me in a way that you can feel that things are not good. And so that starts to degrade the general sense of us being able to trust each other, whether we're having a conversation as two men, or even in our relationships at work, or our relationships at home with our partners. If you're not able to authentically communicate what's alive, this courageous conversations from the heart, what you said, moving this energy, it continues to get, either built up or completely suppressed, and then comes
Mm.
out sideways. And then, so if you hold it for long enough, it has to move somewhere. And if you're not moving that energy, then it comes out as unhealthy rage and all these sort of bad emotions, in inverted commas, that are not mature. Like, there is something about having a strong roar or a fire that comes from rage when it's required and done with love and with real presence. But we're not often modeled that, not on the
Mm.
screens, not in many men in our world. And until we consciously take that and actually start to embody it and see it in safe spaces, I think it's really hard to access, because we don't really know how to do that. So I think that's one of the challenges.
Mm.
I think we've got a strong over identification with money and work as men, and a theme. Like, I'm talking about the world I came from. Yeah, it was just all about money. That's all we spoke about, and that was the competition and the rush to try and achieve more. And there was like a status game that we all tended to play. And I think it's not only took us out of the homes and away from raising the young men that we're talking about now that have absent fathers, but it's also just too much time spent away from the things that really matter most. And if you're serving your mission, sweet. But I know many men that are not. They're just purely there to pay the bills, because I think we also live in a world where we've acquired so much with debt that you're on this hamster wheel that you have to continually hustle. And if you don't, the people that you love and care about are not going to be okay. So I think there's an imbalance in what we've put our priority on. And I think money is perhaps one of those things. And so, yeah, having a space to have these types of conversations and just to be able to recognize and heal as a function of, there's the saying in men's work, I'm sure you know, that your work is my work and my work is your work, meaning you and I sit in a safe container, like a men's circle, similar to where we met. And someone like you stands up and says, fuck, I've just chased money my entire life and I'm fucking bored of it. And it's suddenly the first time I've heard anybody say that, there's a part of me that just goes, oh, thank God. Me too. There's that sense of like a shared struggle that in some ways you coming forward not only gives you the relief of being able to speak openly and be received by the men inside the circle, but also for the men inside the circle that are holding something similar, maybe not exactly the same, but a similar theme, to be able to feel it. The work happens for both of us and the entire circle as a whole. So I really feel that, yeah, that's really the power of coming together as men and sharing these collective themes and troubleshooting them together in a way that I don't think is possible to do in a mixed group, because men, sometimes signaling, there's an idea of wanting to look a specific way. Having feminine energy in a circle changes the dynamic in a way that I don't think we always have access to,
Mm,
really being able to drop it in a way that we do when it's only men.
absolutely. Curious about what do you see what we're being asked to step into as men? What we're being asked, what do you feel like the highest potentiality that we're being asked as men to kind of embody in this time?
What comes up for me initially is authenticity. Like, I don't think there's a way. It's not like this is the thing. I think it's really a sense of recognizing that we all have a different gift to bring to the world, and
Mm.
you can call this purpose or mission or anything to that effect. And your mission and my mission are going to be slightly different in some ways, but if we don't allow ourselves the spaciousness to listen to what that is, and then give ourselves permission to step into that and serve it, however that is, whether it's a career path that pays us money or not, is not really the point. It's really about sharing our authentic truth, whatever that is, our gift that's been given to us by, I think, something greater than ourselves. Resentment starts to build. There's only so long that you can fill your life with material goods and, relationships that signal certain things. I think that for me is the authentic place of recognizing what is it that I've been called to do, and then moving with that, because I think that also becomes, for me, the model that other people in my world around me, in my men's circle, and the youngsters behind me are connected to. It's like, okay, there's somebody who I can see. I'm not sure what's happening there, but I can see he's doing what he came to do. And there's like a
Mm.
resonance energetically that I think is transmitted through being in service of what we came here to do as men. And I actually believe that this is probably more important than our relationships and family. I think this is, as men, the thing that we need to do. We need to find out what our mission is and serve it, because when we're doing that, we feel full in a way that we're able to show up fully for our partners and our families. And I think that's the authenticity is, I think, the piece for me that we're being called to do, because I feel when you're doing that, everything else sort of comes into resonance. When you
Mm.
stick with what you have been called to do for long enough, you will find a way to monetize or pay the bills. You'll be able to hold that truth in a way that I think is what we've been called to do, and I think that's what it is. I'm open to hear your
Awesome.
reflections. What do you think we've been called to?
I'd love to just ask you a question about that. So the podcast is
Yeah.
called Call to Courage, and I hear that being sort of like your mission or sort of your message to men in this moment. Would you describe that as being the one of the pieces that you've been asked to step into most strongly, that perhaps that you had to really find the courage to step into and own your own authenticity? Has that been like a strong theme in your life, a strong mission or strong thing that you've had to step into?
Mm. I think I think the part of being an authentic guide on a particular path, let's call it a healer, inherently has the wounded healer as part of it. You're not able to be the authenticity coach until you have been the person that hasn't been authentic in your life. And so I'm very connected to a version of me, which the story that I told earlier about putting on a specific front so that I could signal to the world of how I thought I needed to show up as Gareth, which included not dumping my bad news on you, and a reoccurring theme of a people pleaser slash young version of me, which is a polite boy, has definitely been part of my journey. And I've noticed in the past, where I haven't been that. And exactly as I explained it earlier, like I've noticed where my inauthenticity has made it impossible to build trust. So I would try to have a relationship, but I couldn't be authentically me for a number of reasons. one, I couldn't own my desires. Here's one. I felt a lot of sexual energy in my body, but I didn't feel like I could authentically move and have multiple lovers in a way that felt aligned because I had a story that looked like one partner, blah, blah, blah. And so when I moved out of my authenticity, I would go into a relationship, but I wasn't properly aligned with my truth. And so I was out of my authenticity. I couldn't build trust and the relationships would all fall apart. And I couldn't quite hold all these pieces in my life. And the same was true for my work. You know, if I was to be completely honest with myself, I wouldn't have necessarily chosen to build an advertising agency that was selling more and more Pepsi to more and more people in poor townships in South Africa. But the money story dragged me along. And so that was, again, like this validation of like, okay, well, I'll do this for the money. So I had a money wound or a money validation of how I wanted to build my business. And so all of those created this reality around me, which in some ways was safe because it's what I knew, but I wasn't very happy. And so my world was starting to collapse around me in certain areas. And my body was starting to give me pretty clear signs that the stress that I was putting it under was not good for me. And it requires a lot of courage to say, I'm going to burn all of this stuff down and try something completely new.
Mm. Mm.
And I think life brings you these opportunities, and either you're listening closely enough to course correct along the way. I wasn't. And yeah, my business started to fail, my body started to fail. I was in a place where I just felt like I hit a proper bottom where I was like, fuck, I can't do this anymore. I'm spent. This is shit. I don't like this. I don't like this. I didn't feel safe in my friendship circles. It was all me. But I think I had to get to that place where I'm like, okay, now I have to make a different decision. And so what you spoke about, the learning that you're having with Amy, is something I'm learning as well. And I say listening at some level or feeling at some level is more part of the feminine, of being like, oh, what is the world wanting me to do here? What is the magic that I'm being called to? It's definitely not continuing building this advertising agency anymore. At year 6, I could have heard that, but I didn't. It took me till year 10 to be, having a dark night of the soul to be like, okay, no more, I can't anymore. And so I think we get these opportunities, and perhaps this is the journey that we go through as we mature, is to listen more and to be like, okay, you can start to refine that nuance and be like, okay, this doesn't feel like it's a yes anymore. And I'm going to give myself permission to change. So the courage theme for me was, okay, I'm going to let all of this go and just see what happens and step into the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen. For me, it was a travel adventure that left South Africa, also got me into NLP and a couple of different healing modalities, and really a journey of reconnecting to myself, self-love, accepting my desires, accepting and loving me, which then gets me to a place where I can, as you said earlier, hold my boundaries for things that are not aligned for me. And from there, this authenticity comes, and then things start to line up, and my outside world starts to reflect this back to me. But it's a courageous act. It's a courageous act
Mm.
to let go of the things that are safe, the relationship that's been there for a certain amount of time, the job, the city, whatever those things are. So I think that's been my journey with connecting to courage. And yeah, my refinement of it is hopefully listening more. Have you heard the analogy that God whispers? Have you heard this story? So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
for those who haven't, it's basically like, yeah, God whispers when he wants you to shift something in your life. And if you don't listen, he talks. And if you don't listen, he may shout. And then eventually he rolls a boulder down the hill, but he'll get you to change at some level. And so my journey is really coming back to this place of just being in silence and creating space to listen to where life is calling me. And yeah, that feels like the refinement of me on my masculine path towards courage.
Awesome. Beautiful. Yeah. I love the one of the ways that I say the God whispers is feather, brick, or truck. And it's like
Ah,
God will tickle you with a feather, then he'll throw a brick, and then he'll hit you with a truck.
into the truck.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like, what are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to the feather, or are you going to wait for the truck? Yeah, and sometimes it needs to be the truck. Sometimes it needs to be the truck to kind of wake you up. Like
Mhm.
I don't know whether I wouldn't describe as having truck moments, but I've certainly had a lot of brick moments. Yeah,
Mm.
like companies ending, like going bankrupt, or heaps of different moments. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So what was your answer to that same question? What do you feel you're being called to, or masculinity is being called to? What's the theme?
I really love the authenticity. I see that as kind of being like the end goal of men just landed, grounded, connected to themselves, authentic to who they are, the man they are, to their own, their own expression that wants to come through the world. I see the pathway of doing that. Of one of the models that I love working with is that where, like, imagine sort of like three circles. It's going to be a little bit hard on a podcast, but the sense of there's essentially healthy, underactive, and overactive. And that I see the pathway for men is to really explore the different aspects of themselves, the different aspects of masculinity, and to explore where are they underactive, where are they repressing, where are they disowning certain qualities. Maybe they're repressing their own sense of certainty or inner knowing or clarity or vision, direction, healthy aggression, sexuality, authority, influence, and really looking and owning those, and in a sense like activating those qualities. And then on the other side with overactive, looking at where are they overactive, where are they being reactive, where are these qualities showing up in a distorted sense where they're creating destruction. I see toxic masculinity being about this side, the overactive, the reactive side. So where is
Mm-hmm.
your leadership or your authority, your influence, your sexuality, your assertiveness, your inner knowing? Where is that showing up in a reactive way that it's creating disharmony in your environment? And then
Mm-hmm.
essentially like stepping into and exploring like what's the healthy, landed, authentic expression of these for me. So yeah, I love that the authenticity is sort of like the end goal, and I see that
Mm-hmm.
being one of the pathways for men, exploring where am I underactive, disowning, where am I being reactive, overactive, distorted. Yeah, because what I've noticed for myself is exploring these two different sides of shadow or dysfunction. It's allowed me, and healing my relationship with both has allowed me to connect into what's my authentic expression of assertiveness, confidence, clarity, vision, direction, influence, sexuality, receptivity, self-worth. Yeah.
So beautiful. What are you
Mm.
tracking in yourself? What has been your sort of core wound or the shadow that you find as a theme in your life?
Oh, self-worth for sure. Yeah.
Self-worth?
Self-worth has been a really big one. Um, Part of that, when I mentioned about that flag in the ground moment with that relationship, that was part of it. That was part of self-worth
Mm,
and being
yeah,
like,
I see
I'm
that.
actually worthy of having a partner that is responsible, that's willing, that loves me so deeply. And yeah, that has been a huge part of my journey that's opened up the possibility of being more confident, being more assertive, being more certain, having my sense of direction, being more influential, um, owning my sexuality more as well. Yeah, yeah, certainly self-worth. And then also some of the stronger aspects as well. Like I was quite reactive when I was a teenager. Like I kind of swing between repression and reactivity, but I would say that, at times I'd be a nuclear bomb waiting to go off. And so there's
Mm,
been a really big journey of, when I went through that feminine journey, there was like, I actually moved a lot more into the repressed side. And I really disowned a lot of those traits because I was like, oh, they're toxic, they're unhealthy, they're not helping me. I need to be more surrendered and in flow. And I did, but it wasn't in separation from those. So then there was a journey of reintegrating those aspects and coming to a place. I've had a big journey around like some strong assertiveness, um, being a dominant force in my life, not being dominant over others, but just being dominant in my own life. Yeah, being convicted, holding strong boundaries, that sort
mm,
of thing. Yeah, yeah,
mm,
like it being okay for me to be that way.
mhm.
Mm. And part of that was the self-worth because it was like, well, I love myself. I love myself, and that's part of who I am. I am quite an assertive person, and I do speak when I'm speaking with from an authentic place. I do speak with a lot of certainty and conviction. I like to move in the world in that way, and that's actually, it's disingenuous for me to not be confident, assertive, and I believe that for a lot of people, actually, for a lot of people, that it's like that's in their own way, Yeah.
Hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, I've seen you write something which I'd love to ask you about, and maybe this is the right time to bring it. The collective theme that we have around authority as a
Mm.
theme in our personal lives and collectively. You want to speak into the theme of authority?
Yeah, authority is a powerful one, because a lot of the times when people mention it, they think about the tyrant, they think about external authority figures having power over over them, whether or not that be the government, or when we're in schools, it was the teacher had authority, and within that, yeah, we just have I see so many of us have a negative relationship with authority, and that causes us to disown our own sense of inner authority, our own inner sense of, when you track back within that post that you're talking about, I spoke about that the root of that is author. The root of authority is essentially authorship. So I see there being a strong journey of us, and this is part of the work that I do as well, is helping men to uncover their relationship with authority. Where does it show up in an overactive sense, where they're trying to, at times they might want to try and force or control their life or what's going on or other people. But equally, they
Hmm.
may disown that. Maybe they're more in the people pleaser. Maybe they're more with the go and the flow. And this can show up within one man. So
Hmm.
I see there being an invitation for men to own and uncover their relationship with their own inner authority, and look at authority figures. Yeah, maybe it's their mum and dad, but really just go on that journey of becoming an authority in their own life. And that's part of what, when you were talking about authenticity, it's like being able to direct your own life, being the authority, because if you are at the whim of someone else's authority, it's very hard actually to be truly authentic to yourself if you're being governed by someone else. So yeah, authority is such a big topic, and it's a little bit taboo. Um, but yeah, there's an invitation to do the shadow work around that and to own the power of it. It's incredibly powerful.
Can you just bring back in? I want to hear you say the part of author being a part of this.
Yeah, so author, that's the root. It's interesting actually when you track back the origin of the word. It's like orta or orta, um, even though the word author is in authority, but it's essentially, yeah, your ability to write, to create, to author something. So by owning your authority, you are you're stepping into your power and ability to author your life and to create your life, to write your life rather than having it written for you.
Thank you. That is exactly what I wanted you to say. Because yeah, the basis of my work is also part of the training that I take men on is this creating of a life script. You know, we have this
Mm.
very clear plan that if I was going to build a house, I wouldn't just walk outside and start ordering things and hope that it all fell together in the right way. It would be very clear that I would need to create a plan with specific intentions and desires and timelines. But none of us tend to do this for our own lives. We don't author our own lives in a way that's like, this is what I want to call in. And until you know what that plan is, it's almost impossible to make decisions. And you end up not authoring your own life. And people tend to push their dreams onto you because you don't actually know where you want to go. And so, this idea of being very intentional about what you want to create and actually scripting what you want in your relationships when it comes to money, when it comes to serving a mission, when it comes to partnership, all of those things, it's only possible to know where you want to go until when you've taken the time to intentionally create it and to create those scripts and to author it. So yeah, so beautiful. I'm so glad you touched on that. Thank you.
And we speak to a lot of women that are kind of they kind of ask the question of like, oh, I want my man to, have a vision or to lead our relationship somewhere. And
Hmm.
that's the path. That's part of the pathway of like, well, what do you actually want to create? Beginning to author, like men authoring their vision for their own lives, firstly, and then, seeing it as larger and larger circles, taking responsibility, authoring their own lives, and then the life that they see with their partner, the life they see with their family, the life they see with their extended family, their community, their society, the world. Like, it's
Hmm.
seeing it as expanding circles rather than, it can be so easy to be like, the world, I've got this vision for the world, like some people kind of, but that can almost be like a separation from actually just being landed and grounded here and owning what's going on in my immediate circle. Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks a bit about it actually in terms of the responsibility. We need to first take responsibility for ourselves, family, community, world, and the expanding of those
Mm.
circles. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a similar theme, which is self love in the beginning, interpersonal love, and universal love expanding out. And many people are out there trying to save the world, but they don't love themselves. And it's like the ripple effect is that it can't ripple out in a safe and cohesive way, or a sound and cohesive way, until you start with the inner circle. So once that's solid, then your family starts to be solid, and then it starts to filter out into your community and then into the world. And so it has to start with a strong, deep connection and a continual watering and refinement of self-love before it ripples out in those circles.
Absolutely. And just as you were describing that, if we're focusing on kind of fixing the external world, but we don't have self love, like we can actually be almost like planting the seed. Like I love the sense that every action that we has a seed, and that seed is like the almost the embodiment or the subconscious intention that we're carrying. If we're coming from a place of not being connected to true love, true acceptance, what's the seed? Maybe it's, there might be anger or rage that's actually the seed that's being planted from the actions, even though, like, and if you were coming from a place of self-love, you could do the same actions, but the the kind of the consequences of that is different because you planted a different seed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
Nice one. Wow, dude. This is a good time
Mate.
for me to ask you about sacred vow. Share what
Yes.
this creation is, what the vision is behind it, and yeah, give us a little insight into what that looks like.
Beautiful. So the Sacred Vow is a podcast that Amy and I run, and essentially we talk about relationships. We talk about the sort of the mission, the purpose behind it is to create secure, intimate, passionate, loving relationships in the world. On the podcast, we talk about things like masculine, feminine. Talk a bit about sort of shadow work. We talk a bit about um, overarching themes within the world. Talk about intimacy, uh, communication, that sort of stuff. Basically, just around that topic. Yeah, it's a.
Mm.
In the first few episodes, we actually detail more deeply our own story and our own journey, our own sort of becoming into our relationship, and
Beautiful.
yeah.
What have you learned from doing a podcast?
The biggest thing is authenticity. We did the first few episodes. It's we just really spoke like the real of the relationship. It was totally unscripted, and uh, the power of it. We were reflected back, through those episodes, and also the later episodes. Just that we don't come on with a script. We don't come on to portray ourselves in a certain way. We just speak what's actually real and authentic, and that has
Hmm.
created so much resonance with other people. It's actually been recalibrating for me personally of like, oh shit, sometimes there's this. I notice this narrative inside of myself from the past. It's like I need to be something, or I need to portray a certain image rather than just, oh, it's me. And that's also woven in with the self-worth conversation. It's like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
worthy just as I am right now, right here. So yeah, that's been a big thing. The resonance of authenticity, it creates a tsunami of
Wow.
like waves and ripples. Yeah. What about for yourself? What have you noticed with doing a podcast?
I noticed that theme of, how you do some things is how you do everything. There's a general sense that, yeah, when I started this, I'm like, I'm going to do one a week. And I started and we did the first 12 episodes, and I didn't have the systems and processes in place, first of all, to deliver it well. And so I got this like sort of burnout piece, which was happening, and we are rushing from one week to the next to get it out. So there was definitely a part of me that was like, okay, dude, you've got your whole life to create this podcast. Put it out when it feels in a good rhythm. And I've built the team around it to be able to promote it. I love having conversations. It seems to connect so directly to what it is that I'm talking about, which is the authentic conversations that we spoke about from the heart of being able to connect to other people. And yeah, while the conversations are for men, I speak to men and women about life stuff, some of the challenges of what it's like to be in a body, what it's like to date someone that's going through perimenopause, like have authentic conversations about what's genuinely alive. And yeah, I've noticed over the last few years, the teachers that I've been around, the friendship circles that I've been around, I've had so many beautiful conversations that often I would be like, I wish I could have shared this somehow, or I wish I had had access to this conversation a few months or years ago. And so the podcast gives me a platform to be able to do that. And I think, just like this, I wouldn't have had this conversation with you had I not had a podcast. Like you and I met at a time, in 2019, and our lives just took different paths. But there's something about the podcast that just gives you like a permission slip to reach out to someone and say, hey, let's just hang out and record our conversation. I like what you're doing in the world. I don't know exactly what it is, but I get a sense there'd be some magic in it for me. And hopefully by recording this conversation, I've learned so much as a function of being in your space and what your journey's been like and some of the themes and different ways of looking at the same thing. So all of that has just been rich.
Mm.
And then, like I said, your work is my work. And then, a couple thousand people listen to this episode and they also get to go like, thank God I'm not the only one dancing with this. And so, yeah, it lights me up to be able to have this platform, to be able to have these conversations and for it to be distributed out into the ethers through the digital. Um, One of the themes that I've got in my work is I have a desire to expand through the digital because of its low barrier to entry and its ability to reach, but I really want to anchor in the physical. So, actual men sitting around in a circle, it's not, you can't replace that in a Zoom call. And
No,
while our King Circle is super, super powerful, and I love creating that space, the next iteration of what we create is actually creating the playbook, maybe something similar to Mankind Project, for brothers that are resonating with this to go into their own community and to find 6 men and to hold a bi-weekly men's circle and to actually, yeah, sit together and, have these conversations one-on-one, because I think I love the fact that we can have this while you're sitting in Australia. And yeah, dude, I got to meet you sitting around a fire in Australia, and you can't replace that. And so I'd like to
no.
have both. So yeah, I think that's really the approach that we're taking here.
Amazing. Love it. Yeah. I think there's going to be more need for that in-person stuff as well as we head more digital, and even conversations about AI are super interesting to me. My partner and I just talk about that. I feel like there's going to be a time of really valuing face to face, like belly to belly, yeah, type connection, conversations, experiences. Yeah,
So good, brother.
yeah.
Where can the listeners of this podcast connect with you, bro? What's a good place to get connected to you and your work? And they can look for the Sacred Vow, and we'll definitely link it up in the show notes. But yeah, have a punt of whatever you have coming up in your world.
Yeah, awesome. So social media is the best place. So Instagram, david.a.charles is my Instagram. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sort of like the subtitle of that is the masculinity method. And that's primarily my key focus. Also, you can find me on Facebook as well, just through David A. Charles. And so, yeah, my primary focus is on the masculinity method, which is a program that I run for men. I'm just about to start an exclusive program for a community, but I'll be launching a more public one, likely to start in April. And that's moving
Okay.
through that sort of the healthy underactive, overactive cycle around those different traits and that sort of stuff. Also
Mm.
emotional mastery and that sort of stuff. So that's a deep like soul program offering from me to the world. That's the pathway that I see to authenticity. And
Mm.
Amy and I will also be doing like just a pure like relationship for women around femininity, and we'll likely be doing sort of a couples one as well sometime later in the year. But the femininity will be launching, getting started in April. Yeah,
Beautiful, man.
awesome.
Well,
It's
dude,
been
thanks for saying yes.
it's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. The time's
Yeah,
gone
man.
very, very quickly. Thank you so much for just creating this podcast and having me on. Thank you.
So good, brother. I'm looking forward to when we can sit around the fire together again in person. Stoked to meet Amy when that opportunity arises. And if you find yourself in Latin America, our spare room is space for two of you to come visit.
Amazing. Thank you, mate. Thank you.
Much love, brother.
Much love.